So it's not that he's uninformed, but he can always, when he feels that he's uninformed, or when it turns out he was wrong about something, he can always pull the ripcord and say, I'm just a comic. We were stoned. It was fun. Don't take medical advice from me. I don't play a doctor on the internet, right?
And here we have the Lex Fridman podcast. And who's his guest today? Well, none other than noted rationalist and atheist Sam Harris. Yeah, a lot of people are big fans of Sam Harris. Even I was, many years ago. I have to admit, I listened to his podcast quite a bit. He comes across as very, he does come across as reasonable. When Trump was elected, of course, notably, Sam Harris just got an amazing case of Trump derangement syndrome, which has not left him to this day. In fact, he's still on about it whenever anyone asks him about it. He just can't get over it. Now, that's not so important, but he's clearly an intelligent guy. He talks about a lot of things. I think, well, if he wants to call himself an atheist, that's fine by me. I'm not an atheist. I wasn't raised in the church or anything like that. My family was not religious, but I've always believed in God, absolutely. So I can't say I'm a Christian because I wasn't raised that way. But regardless, I think Sam Harris's attempts to explain why atheism is the rational way and that believing in God is irrational, I think, fall completely flat, actually. If you're interested in that, you can find plenty of clips with him talking about that topic. But today he's talking about Joe Rogan, and let's see what he has to say about Joe Rogan as he talks to Lex Fridman.
Well, because you brought up Joe, he's somebody like you I look up to. I've learned a lot from him because I think who he is privately as a human being, also he's kind of the voice of curiosity to me. He inspired me that, so unending, open-minded curiosity, much like you are the voice of reason. They recently had a podcast, Joe had recently had a podcast with Jordan Peterson, and he brought you up saying they still have a hope for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any chance
saw that clip, yeah.
Any chance you talk to Joe again and reinvigorate your friendship?
Yeah, well, I reached out to him privately when I saw that clip.
Did you use the power of love?
Joe knows I love him and consider him a friend, right? So there's no issue there. He also knows I'll be happy to do his podcast when we get that together. So there's I have got no policy of not talking to Joe or not doing his podcast. I think we got a little sideways along these same lines where, we've talked about Brett and Elon and other people. It was never to that degree with Joe because Joe's in a very different lane, right? And consciously so. Joe is a stand-up comic who interviews, who just is interested in everything, interviews the widest conceivable variety of people, and just lets his interests collide with their expertise or lack of expertise. It's a super wide variety of people. He'll talk about anything, and he can always pull the ripcord, saying, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. I'm a comic. I'm stoned. We just drank too much, right? It's very entertaining. It's all in, to my eye, it's all in good faith. I think Joe is an extraordinarily ethical, good person.
Also doesn't use Twitter. Doesn't really use Twitter.
Yeah. No, the crucial difference, though, is that because he is an entertainer first. I'm not saying he's not smart and doesn't understand things. What's potentially confusing is he's very smart and he's also very informed. His full-time job is when he's not doing stand-up or doing color commentary for the UFC.
Quick interlude there. Frankly, I've seen Joe Rogan stand up, and he's just not that good at it. He is a funny guy. He's intelligent and he's humorous, but his stand-up comedy, no. I just don't think he's good at it. He's got plenty of other talents.
His full-time job is talking to lots of very smart people at great length. So he's created the Joe Rogan University for himself, and he's gotten a lot of information crammed into his head. So it's not that he's uninformed, but he can always, when he feels that he's uninformed, or when it turns out he was wrong about something, he can always pull the ripcord and say, I'm just a comic. We were stoned. It was fun. Don't take medical advice from me. I don't play a doctor on the internet, right? I can't quite do that, right? You can't quite do that. We're in different lanes. I'm not saying you and I are in exactly the same lane, but for much of Joe's audience, I'm just this establishment shill who's just banging on about the universities and medical journals, and it's not true, but that would be the perception. And as a counterpoint to a lot of what's being said on Joe's podcast or certainly Brett's podcast on these topics, I can see how they would form that opinion. But in reality, if you listen to me long enough, you hear that I've said as much against the woke nonsense as anyone, even any lunatic on the right who can only keep that bright shining object in view, right? So there's nothing that Candace Owens has said about wokeness that I haven't said about wokeness insofar as she's speaking rationally about wokeness. But we have to be able to keep multiple things in view, right? If you could only look at the problem of wokeness and you couldn't acknowledge the problem of Trump and Trumpism and QAnon and the explosion of irrationality that was happening on the right and bigotry that was happening on the right, you were just disregarding half of the landscape. And
oh, here we go. He's already started talking about Trump. I think we know where this is going to go. Yeah, well, he makes a point. I mean, again, I've got mixed feelings about Sam Harris. I think he thinks he's much smarter than he actually is. He's very dismissive. He is like an establishment shill. Sorry, he just said that Joe, a lot of Joe Rogan's audience would dismiss him as an establishment shill. Yeah, I can understand why. He basically comes across that way. He's clearly an intelligent guy, but talk to him about the vaccine hesitancy, for example, which they're going to talk about in this next bit. And you'll see, we were right. Basically, his argument is, well, we were right, and, well, maybe we weren't quite so right, but we were as right as we could be based on the information at the time, which turned out to be means we were wrong. But we were right at the time, so we were right. That's kind of the argument of these types. Let's get into it here. Let's see if I've got the right place.
There was a lot that we believed we knew about the efficacy of closing schools during pandemics, right? During the Spanish flu pandemic and others, right? But there's a lot we didn't know about COVID. We didn't know how negligible the effects would be on kids compared to older people. We didn't know
my problem. I really enjoyed your conversation with Eric Topo, but also didn't. So he's one of the great.
This conversation with who? If anybody understood that, let me know in the comments.
Communicators in many ways on Twitter, like distillation of the current data. But I hope I'm not overstating it, but there is a bit of an arrogance from him that I think could be explained by him being exhausted by being constantly attacked by conspiracy theory, like anti-vaxxers.
Yeah.
Got a problem with anti-vaxxers? Do you have to be a conspiracy theorist to be an anti-vaxxer? Well, I might as well admit it right now. Of course, my family, I've said in other videos, if you've listened to me, I mean entire family, my nuclear family and my extended family are all some variety of Democrat, libtard, liberal, or progressive. Let's put it that way. And I am very much the outlier as a traditionalist. I don't like to call myself conservative because I think conservatives are absolutely useless in America and in Europe, here in Europe too. I don't like to call myself a Republican because I think both establishment parties are corrupt abominations. I would say, if anything, paleo-conservative, so very traditionalist. Anyway, so my entire family, of course, were gagging for the vax as soon as it showed up. Started taking it as soon as they could, and of course started asking each other, "Have you got it yet? Have you got it yet?" And I remember on one big Zoom call, must have been around Christmas time, the whole family was there, and they were asking each other, and then somebody asked me, my mother asked me, I think, "Oh, Carl, have you got it yet?" And I said, "Nope, not interested. I'm not getting it." And the shocked silence from everybody. And of course, the immediate Spanish Inquisition started. "Well, why not? What are you doing?" And I just said to them, "My body, my choice." And that started a long downhill thing in my family. Of course, they just can't get their heads over it. "Oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Well, I wasn't an anti-vaxxer until this one came along, but you're not helping things, and you're making me question a lot of the things that I had assumed were correct back when I used to trust, the government and the media and all that." But that trust has been seriously eroded. I mean, it had been eroding anyway, seriously. And now today it's even more seriously eroded. So anti-vaxxer, maybe, maybe not. We'll see. But if I were having a baby now, if I were giving birth now, I know what I would do. Let's put it that way. Because have you seen the schedule of vaccines that they give to newborns? It's insane. But we're not here to talk about that. Let's go back to the clip.
To me, the same thing happens with people that start drifting to being right wing. Is to get attacked so much by the left, they become almost irrational and arrogant in their beliefs. And I felt your conversation with Eric Topol did not sufficiently empathize with people that have skepticism, but also did not sufficiently communicate uncertainty we have. So like many of the decisions you made, many of the things you were talking about, were kind of saying there's a lot of uncertainty, but this is the best thing we could do now.
Well, it was a forced choice. You're going to get COVID. Do you want to be vaccinated when you get it?
Right.
That was always, in my view, an easy choice.
Yes, in your view, it's an easy choice for you. Not necessarily an easy choice for everybody else, Sam Harris, or medical establishment. I finally got COVID right at the end, like literally right at the end. It was I hadn't been back to the States in 3 years because of it. So I hadn't visited my family, and my young daughter and I went, and yeah, probably got it from someone on the airplane. It was, must have been August of 2020, what was that, 2022 then? Something like that, yeah. It was, all travel had been de-restricted and all that. But yeah, I got it. And in my case, wasn't bad at all. Lasted a couple days. But anyway.
And it's up until you start breaking apart the cohorts and you start saying, okay, wait a minute. There is this myocarditis issue in young men.
Oh, yeah, the myocarditis issue in young men caused by the vax.
Let's talk about that. When before that story emerged, it was just clear that this is, if it's not knocking down transmission as much as we had hoped, it is still mitigating severe illness and death.
That was not clear at all. Literally everybody I knew took multiple jabs, got multiple jabs, and every single one of them got COVID. And every single one of them told me, "Oh, thank God I've got the vaccine. Think how bad it would have been if I hadn't had the vaccine." Yeah, and I got it right at the end. I avoided it for virtually the entire time, and I got it. My case was very mild. Now, of course, some people get it worse than others. And I'm not young either. I'm not a kid. I'm no kid. I'm 59 years old. So there's lots of variables, obviously. But this idea, he's just contradicting himself right there. Yeah, we found out later that, maybe some people are getting myocarditis because of the vax. But at the time, we didn't know that, so it was okay. It's like, what?
And I still believe that it is the current view of most people competent to analyze the data that we lost something like 300,000 people unnecessarily in the U.S. because of vaccine hesitancy.
But I think there's a way to communicate with
Well, if they didn't want to take it, they didn't want to take it. Okay.
humility about the uncertainty of things that would increase the vaccination rate.
I do believe that it is rational and sometimes effective to signal impatience with certain bad ideas, right? And certain conspiracy theories and certain forms of
I
misinformation.
think so.
Because it's just,
I just think it makes you look like a douchebag most times.
Did Lex Fridman just call Sam Harris a douchebag? He didn't really. Yeah, it was kind of ambiguous there. I guess he wasn't calling him directly a douchebag, but just saying that people who express impatience with other people for their hesitancy, if you're impatient with them and not understanding of their position, then it makes you look like a douchebag. Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Well said. I think that's a good way to end this clip. Let me know what you think in the comments of my revelations or about what Sam Harris has to say. I think he makes zero sense at all. He just talks in circles, Sam Harris. I've lost a lot of respect for him over the years. Not in everything, and I don't listen to him anymore anyway. I don't listen to his podcast, so I don't know what his big things are these days. But let me know what you think. I've been reading all the comments recently and replying to quite a few. So it really does help the channel when you comment. It also helps when you like the video and when you subscribe, because that helps me continue being able to make content for you.